What would it take for more entrepreneurs to start companies here, to scale companies here, to succeed in companies here, as well as those investors? That's why we spend a lot of time advocating on behalf of our client. Yes, there is a lot we need to do collectively to introduce more domestic capital into deals here, but the fact that capital that largely has no borders sees us as a great destination, that's something we should celebrate. There's no doubt in my mind that AI will be the most transformative technology that I have professionally lived through.
You're not ordinary. No 9 to 5, meetings about meetings, or compulsory corporate team building for you. Your business is extraordinary, and you need an extraordinary bank. From pre-seed to IPO and beyond, HSBC Innovation Banking offers VC-backed tech and life science businesses custom solutions, co-created by actual industry experts and delivered by a dedicated team you can call whenever you need. Discover extraordinary at hsbcinnovationbanking.co.uk. Registered and protected by Mark Monitor. Hello and welcome to the UKTN podcast, your weekly chat with the movers and shakers of the UK tech industry and your destination for all things UK tech related. I'm your host, Jane Wakefield, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by Emily Turner, the CEO of HSBC Innovation Banking UK. And we're here for a very special InVision podcast. Welcome, Emily.
Jane, thanks so much for having me.
Right, I want to start off not talking about HSBC Innovation Banking, but I want to start talking about you. So just tell me a little bit about your route to this exciting mix of innovation and banking.
Sure. So why don't I first describe what my job is, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the route. So I joined the business in the first half of last year, really with the aim to scale and grow HSBC Innovation Banking in partnership with the amazing innovators and investors in this country. We have an ambition that I believe that we share, which is around growing the innovation economy in the UK from what is already a strength, but to something even more impressive. And that's on the back of a number of structural forces that I'm sure we'll get into through the course of this discussion, but also just the great potential of this country. And so that's what I came to do. I very much stand on the shoulders of the previous leadership of the company that I now run. And this is a scaling moment for us. I knew the company actually for many years because I worked at Citi for 13 years. And one of my responsibilities, I was head of business development there, was on the strategic investing side. And many of our portfolio companies knew the previously SVB team and the SVB proposition, and then what became HSBC Innovation Banking. So I had close ties to the team, to the business. I knew the capabilities that they had, and they were quite distinguished. And so when the previous CEO called me to ask if I would consider the role, it was definitely one of those out of left field discussions of sort of, I've never thought of running a bank, but wow, this is a bank that is so different and really speaks to both my passions, but where I think there's huge potential. I couldn't say no.
And I detect not an UK accent there.
That is true. And not often considered or guessed as a UK accent. I grew up in the US on the East Coast, but I consider myself professionally British. I moved here.
Love that. Professionally British.
Professionally British. I moved here just 2 years out of university, and I've worked here ever since. Like so many expats who come to this country, I thought, I'd come for 2 years, see what it's like, and learn new skills, meet new people, see Europe, and then just never left.
Well, I'm very glad that you didn't. And we'll get into a little bit about the sort of US, UK problems or issues around VC and investment a bit later. But talk me through what it is that HSBC Innovation Banking does. What is it that you offer? What's unique about what you offer?
Yeah, so we are the only purpose-built bank in the UK for the innovation economy. We offer a variety of products and services, some very traditional to banks, some probably surprising in a banking context, which is all around supporting entrepreneurs in technology and life sciences, as well as the VC and private equity investors that support them. And when I think about sort of both sides of our client base, and we work with over 4,000 clients here in the UK in those groups. So it's a large proportion of the venture-backed tech and life sciences companies, as well as 75% of the funds as well. So you might think, okay, It's transaction banking. So it's how do you manage your cash? How do you manage your payments, FX? We do all of those things. And in most instances, we leverage the huge scale and capabilities of HSBC behind us. So you can think about the same foreign exchange capabilities that one of the largest companies in the world might have access to. Our clients have that as well. But then we also have unique insights and capabilities which help them, for instance, in going to market, making connections, for instance, between our clients, say, in enterprise technology with some of the largest corporate clients of HSBC, where they might be able to meet, to sell their products, to find a commercial relationship. So we do more than just a traditional bank. We do a lot around convening and creating those connection moments so our clients are more likely to succeed.
And when you say surprising, that's making those connections, is it? Is there any other aspects of that you do that would surprise people that isn't really a traditional banking service?
So we do a lot around really two things. So one is we do a lot around developing content and insights. So even things that go beyond what we do. So we actually have a term sheet report that we do every year. We look at roughly 50% of all deals in the UK. It's over 700 term sheets, and we create what we believe is really the leading benchmark for both investors as well as founders to figure out what should they be looking for in an investment. And if you're a founder and you're trying to work with investors to raise money, chances are the investor you're working with has seen tens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of term sheets, and maybe you've seen one, two, or three. How do you make sure that you're doing the things that position you and your company in the right place? That's what we do. And even though we're not involved in those transactions, we're able to provide those insights and that scale of market depth and that nuance to our clients on both sides. So it's things like that where we say, ultimately, we want it more likely than not that our clients succeed. And so how are the different ways that we can tip the scales? Another part, which you might say is surprising, I spend a lot of time, as does much of the team, with various advocacy groups, various industry bodies. We're not there talking about what's in the interest of a bank. We're talking about what's in the interest of our customers. So what would it take for more entrepreneurs to start companies here, to scale companies here, to succeed in companies here, as well as those investors? That's why we spend a lot of time advocating on behalf of our clients, which I think is quite different than other banks or other financial institutions.
And you will see people throughout that entire journey from seed all the way to scale up. What differences are you seeing about what they need at different stages of that journey?
Yeah, so back to the comment on, we are a purpose-built bank. We are a purpose-built bank for companies, to your point, could be from the day they spin out of a top university in the UK all the way through to public listed companies. And along the way, they might be bootstrapped, they might be venture backed, they might be PE backed, or they could be listed along the way. And the challenges are, change along that. What I would say is what's quite common, or what is increasingly common is maybe a better way to say it, is that generally speaking, and this is part of one of the many things that I love about the innovation economy and I love about my job, my clients are individuals who are looking to generally tackle everywhere problems but starting locally. And they have that global ambition to change the world, to change outcomes. And so they need a bank and they need partners who can help them scale. So what we're seeing is it's not just the 100-person company or the profitable company that wants to go cross-border. What we're seeing is a very large number of early-stage companies that are going cross-border even earlier in their journey, and we're there to support them in that. We in HSBC are not just active in innovation banking here in the UK. We actually have dedicated innovation banking teams on the ground in 9 other markets around the world, which cover the majority of corridors of both capital as well as innovative companies as they scale around the globe.
So given your unique position and insights into the UK markets and beyond, what are your kind of top tips for people starting out and making sure that they can make successes of often these brilliant ideas?
Yeah, so I think for anyone who's either a first-time founder or thinking about raising money, we have a lot of content and a lot of insights here. So a great place to go. We have a lot of resources on our website, which we can share later. I believe you maybe even shared at the beginning of this, where there's pitch decks, metrics, and really debunking, how to think about if I'm in a meeting and an investor asks me about my burn rate or churn or what are these things? How should I understand those? What does that mean? So first and foremost, get smart, check out some of those resources, and we can help you there. Then I'd say go to the term sheet guide and think about, for companies in the sector that you're in or sort of at the stage that you're in, where is best practice? Where are averages in the market around valuations, around financial terms, around control? Because, for instance, when you raise money, you need to think about, what does that mean for voting rights? What does that mean for the decisions that I want to make for my company? Where do I actually want to bring in people with more control instead of me or others because they have insights and great things to add to my company? So use the term sheet guide as well, I would say is a great way to go. But ultimately, companies that are successful are those that are able to demonstrate to investors, but also to their customers, an ability to execute. They're going after an enduring problem so they can show real business model resilience, and they're going after a big problem, but something that's not a one-time fix and then you're done. And then also some degree of innovation and doing things differently. And so if you've got those three things and then you use the foundational tools that I mentioned before, I think you're set up to succeed.
You can have a great idea, but the funding becomes the thing that really pushes that idea into the real world. What are you seeing in terms of the kind of landscape out there? Because we talk about this a lot on this programme, and we have very differing views, from the sort of very optimistic, everything's fine, there's not a problem, to people who see it very linked to the economy and the problems that we're seeing in the wider economy and geopolitics. So where do you see, what's your sort of viewpoint on that?
Yeah, so I should probably self-disclose I'm an optimist. So please take that as the starting position here. And I not just consider myself an optimist, I consider myself an optimist by choice. And so I sort of commit to optimism in all that I do. So please, that should be the warning.
Optimism is best and the most prevalent emotion that we see on this program, I think.
So please, with that at least degree of self-awareness, I think if we just look at the first quarter of this year, funding was up significantly in the UK. We saw $7.8 billion invested into venture-backed companies in the UK. That's up 60% year on year. And that makes up 41% of all the venture capital deployed in Europe. So it's more than France, Germany, and the Netherlands combined. I think, what are the other signals that we're seeing within that versus just sort of the overall headline numbers? Number one, we're seeing large deals. So, we might come to this later, but sort of how do we think about scale ups? How do we think about that, potential challenges of getting later stage capital? We are seeing real growth there, both in large deals, but sort of proof points that take us along there. We're also seeing a lot of deals happening outside of London. So this isn't, the UK is not a one trick pony in terms of the UK, but we've got real depth and breadth. And I think not only is that exciting about the growth of the market, but also outcomes for people in those communities, for jobs, and, for a number of different things that are just great for the UK overall. We probably need to talk about AI. 70% of deals in the first quarter, were in AI. And then the other piece to talk about is foreign capital. I think there's a lot of questions about foreign capital in UK deals. I see it as an and. And what I mean by that is, yes, there is a lot we need to do collectively to introduce more domestic capital into deals here. But the fact that capital that largely has no borders sees this as a great destination, that's something we should celebrate. And so the fact that, US as the largest sort of anchor of it, but also European and Asian investors are deploying capital in this market, that should be a competitive advantage for us. We should be able to, to me, I think we grow the pie by adding domestic capital, but also growing foreign investment into this country.
Is the concern about that foreign investment around the fact that eventually those companies will leave the UK and go either into the US or the Asian kind of markets?
I think there's a lot of different people who have different, concerns in this space. Ultimately, what we've seen quite powerfully in Silicon Valley, but you've also seen it in places like Sweden and to an extent markets like Estonia, is a founder flywheel. And so if you can create great companies, and you don't need many of them, and we've got many of them now here, and you have not only great wealth created for people involved in those companies early, but also great learnings around what you need to succeed, they can span many new companies. So we've already seen lots of companies being founded in the recent past, for instance, from former employees of DeepMind. We've seen, a huge number of people from Revolut start new companies, and we'll just continue to see that flywheel accelerate in this country. So to me, yes, there could be concerns here, but to me, the most important thing is that flywheel of both capital being reinvested and then the talent who, if you can go to a pitch meeting or if you can go to your customers and say, sort of been there, done that, it's even more compelling. That's where we will see a real acceleration going forward.
Yeah, and that's a great point, isn't it? Because just like in Silicon Valley, those companies grew out of Google and the other big tech giants. We are starting to create those behemoths from which can grow smaller fry. You also mentioned that the UK is kind of the best destination in Europe. Why is that? Is it just because we have people with fantastic ideas? We've got that culture of innovation, or are there other reasons as well?
Yeah, so I think let's just if we ground ourselves in a few sort of data points, so that the UK VC market has grown 7x in the last 10 years, which is amazing. It is also obviously from a small base, but we're seeing that huge growth. And there's a few factors that existed, I think, supporting that growth, but speak to the growth going forward. So first and foremost is R&D that we have here. Some of the best universities in the world. We see them as the source of many of the best spin-outs. And that's only set to continue. Not only do they spin out great companies, they spin out great talent. And so there's a huge amount of technical talent in AI, but across different domains in deep tech and beyond in this country. And so that will, in a world where the success of companies, particularly the early stage, comes down to who can you attract to work there, that's a huge competitive advantage. And then when you add to that the rule of law that we have here, as well as the great time zone, that only serves to support the growth going forward.
And we've sort of touched on this with the idea around foreign investment and concerns about companies leaving. But there is a pattern, isn't there, where companies start in the UK, but they don't scale up. They move. They go on the NASDAQ. They find a more natural place if they want to list in the US market. Are we doing things about that? I know everyone's very aware of it. It's talked about pretty much every time I speak to an investor or a founder. Do you think we're getting to grips with that problem and solving it?
I'm going to frame the problem slightly differently, or maybe the question, because again, sort of not a problem. I see growth in the UK market and health in the UK market about great companies and great founders being able to attract capital at the right quantum at the right moment, and then great investors being able to make great returns, and that to be recycled into the into the UK economy, not necessarily just the US economy through those investors, and ultimately benefiting not just the funds and the humans who work at the funds, but also the individuals and the asset owners who sit behind them. So think of the pensioners whose money is actually being deployed. Now, does that require the company to be listed? Maybe, maybe not. And does it require it to be listed in the UK? Maybe, maybe not. Now, there, of course, are questions around being able to list here, to stay here. And I think those are really important. But fundamentally, to me, the success in this market and the success of this economy driven by outcomes in innovation will be about great companies getting capital at the right time in the right scale. And note, I didn't say with the right accent or passport attached to that money. And then also with ultimately returns going to pensioners, asset owners, and individuals in this country, which helps outcomes for all.
So we've done pretty well getting through probably half of this interview without mentioning AI, but it's time to talk about it. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of companies that put AI in their titles and perhaps they don't need to. How do you sort of tell the ones that are going to succeed? How do you pick the winners? And is it all about AI?
Yeah, so when I think about AI, and I've spent many parts of my working life in emerging technologies and looking at different areas, there's no doubt in my mind that AI will be the most transformative technology that I have professionally lived through. And it's tough for me to call out a large industry that's not going to be impacted by AI. So in terms of the question of sort of, is AI everywhere? I think it is, right? So, and I think that's the potential of this technology, as well as what we're already seeing, it is there. And it's also undeniable the focus that it is commanded from investors means that we know, and we see this in companies every day, that AI companies command higher valuations and higher raises than non-AI companies. Now, that doesn't mean that if you put AI in the title of your company, that your valuation goes up. We work with, many of the investors across the UK, and these are some of the smartest people in the world, and people that I'm very privileged to get to work with them. They'll see through that.
Yeah.
so I think that's sort of the first sort of piece, which is always assume that the person on the other side of the table is just as smart, if not smarter than you. And if you do that, I think it forces you to up your game. But that's probably a good point here. But we need to all be, I think about how AI impacts our business really in three ways. So number one is, we are a purpose-built bank of 600 plus people. And when I think about the potential of AI for knowledge workers, it's huge. So, I have a question for me as a CEO, which is how do we use these tools and bring them into what we do and do that not only safely, but in a way that really accelerates and keeps us at the leading edge of what we do. Two is, and I think this is more of where your question was, what does this mean for our clients? And increasingly, our business and enterprise software has always been the largest part of the UK market, but AI is now everywhere and touching all of the areas of the UK innovation economy. So it's critically important to our go-to-market, what we know about our clients, and importantly, what we know about their needs. And for instance, this is things like, how do companies pay for compute? How do they pay for their infrastructure? That really impacts what they need from a bank and how we think about things. And the final piece is, what does this mean for the UK? And I think there's a lot of reasons, particularly going back to the R&D strength, the talent strength that I mentioned before, where the UK is really well positioned to win in AI.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier the term sheet, and I was looking at some of the stuff that you'd found out. One of the bits that I thought was really interesting was that over 50% of deals across all life stages are now funded outside of London. And I think that regional thing is really interesting. We've had a lot of regional tech hubs on this podcast. It's great not to be London-centric, and it's great to know that stuff is happening outside of the capital. So tell me a little bit about that from your perspective, and whether you're seeing different things in different areas of the country.
Yeah, so very much sort of aligned to what you said. So more and more deals are happening outside of London, and not just in one place, right? So you see this, Cambridgeshire is the largest location outside of London, but then you have Oxford, you've got Manchester, you've got Bristol. There's lots of innovation hubs around the UK, and each of them is developing its own specific areas of specialization that generally speak to the talent and the research that happens in those spaces. We couldn't have a conversation about the ecosystem outside of London without talking about university spinouts. University spinouts make up 9% of the term sheets that we see in the market. And, the universities in this country are creating many, many companies that command huge valuations and huge funding over time. And this has always been a strength in the UK. So I would call out life sciences and deep tech, specifically in university spinouts. So of the university spinouts that we saw in the UK last year, nearly half of those were in life sciences, so 46%, and then a further 38% was in deep tech. It speaks to, in my view, the nature of those business models and the fact that they are, IP-rich businesses that are generally grounded in science, but also the strength of the research and the capabilities in this country. If we think about the pipeline and where things are going, you can think about Edinburgh for clean tech, biotech, and sort of broader health med tech, and also potentially hydro resources, and then the university connectivity as a reason why we expect even more to happen in Edinburgh. Manchester has historically been a great location for hardware innovators. And deep tech companies due to the city's industrial heritage and the research universities there that we continue to see going forward. And then in Oxford, we have life sciences and health tech, and we have the overall sort of golden triangle that I would be remiss not to mention. And then finally, I'd say in Bristol, biotech and clean tech are huge. So if you are an innovator in one of those places, to what you were saying before, you do not need to come to London. And then the other side is if you are capital looking to be deployed in those spaces, there's great markets. And we see that across traditional venture, LP structures, LPGP structures, and venture capital funds being invested outside of London. But we're also seeing considerable VCT activity as well as CVC activity. So if you take great science, great talent, great investment, those are the ingredients that you need.
It's great to hear as well because, I do worry about graduates. So my son has literally just graduated from university and I worry about what his future will look like. It feels as if entrepreneurship is perhaps the way forward. Are there tips you can give graduates about starting businesses and how they can use their universities to do that? Are we seeing universities really helping graduates with good ideas that want to spin out businesses?
First and foremost, if I call out places like Cambridge or Oxford or UCL or King's or Manchester, these universities are doing a lot to help their students create great value for themselves, for the university, and ultimately for the companies that they create. And many, many more universities. It's not just those that I just quickly rattled through. But I would give slightly different advice and take this much more as like M as a human versus me as the CEO of HSBC Innovation Bank. I've always thrived when I've worked with people that I respect and I admire and I can learn from, and doing something that I'm passionate about. And that would apply to entrepreneurship. That would apply to working in a big company. It would apply to anything, And so when I think about my own job, I think I have the best job at HSBC and probably in the city. The fact that I can work with the clients that I get to work with who are trying to change the lives of millions, if not billions, that are trying to change the way that things are done, who are so open to new ideas, who bring a learning mindset every day. And then I'm working with individuals who have such deep expertise and who know so much more about their area of the innovation economy, about banking services, whatever it is. I love that. And so if your child can find that in a job, entrepreneurship or otherwise, like that would be my advice. Because ultimately, I spend more time awake with people I work with than probably, most others in my life. And so you have to love it.
It does seem like you do love your job, which is great to hear. And it is an absolutely fascinating and exciting place to work in. Talking to entrepreneurs is so exciting to me as well, because they're always so optimistic. And on that note of optimism, which you said, you carry with you as well, what does the future hold for HSBC Innovation Banking? Is there anything you can tell us about what's coming up and how you intend to expand?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, HSBC Innovation Banking started here in the UK back in March 2023 with the acquisition of SVB. But we have since scaled to 9 incremental markets, and they represent the majority of capital flows as well as many of the go-to markets. And so I would say as companies, particularly here, but everywhere in the world, look to scale, we have a proposition today that not only is great banking and great opportunities for our clients when they're early stage, but as they look to go global. And delivering on those capabilities, delivering on that growth, staying with them side by side to support that journey, that's what they should expect of us. That's what they should want from us. And we're the only bank who can deliver that.
Well, Emily, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jane.
And thank you to everybody that's been listening. We will, of course, be back next week with another episode. But meanwhile, you can keep in touch with everything that's happening in the UK tech news at www.uktech.news. Do stay in touch on social media with UKTN and myself, where you can get in touch with all your questions and suggestions about the show. Until next week, it's goodbye from me. You're not ordinary. No 9 to 5, meetings about meetings, or compulsory corporate team building for you. Your business is extraordinary, and you need an extraordinary bank. From pre-seed to IPO and beyond, HSBC Innovation Banking offers VC-backed tech and life science businesses custom solutions, co-created by actual industry experts and delivered by a dedicated team you can call whenever you need. Discover extraordinary at hsbcinnovationbanking.co.uk. Registered and protected by Mark Monitor.